Welcome to the Spiritable podcast. My name is Luke.
I'm Richard, and I just got my master's degree in divinity.
Everyone has a different perspective, so we're bringing on all sorts of people from different walks of life, like Jewish, Buddhist, Christian, atheist, and more, to discuss the biggest spiritual and moral questions and how they see it in their philosophy.
Our goal is to find where we agree and disagree, and hopefully challenge ourselves to be better people in the process.
Together, we shall dive deeper and get weirder. All right, so welcome back to the Spiritable podcast. Today we have on with us Michael Stone, who is a certified holotropic breathwork facilitator, shamanic practitioner, founder of Holotropic Breathwork LA, and creator of a new type of breathwork, Neurodynamic Breathwork Online. So Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Anything you want to tack on to that introduction there?
No, I think that's good. I also have a bit of a background in science and neuroscience, so I also do courses in understanding how your brain works more and how to use that, so you can kind of be the CEO of your brain instead of it using you as you go through life.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
Here's a fascinating question that I love to ask, because this is a struggle. This one's a struggle for me. If you had to choose one, would you rather be liked or respected?
Respected.
Interesting.
Okay, why?
For me, it's sometimes people can like you for the wrong reasons. And it doesn't necessarily, this is from my own worldview and perspective, reflect well on what you're contributing to the world, what you're accomplishing, just because you're liked. You know, many times people are liked because of, they create drama and chaos in the world, and people just like the entertainment aspect of it and that type of thing. But being respected, to me, is more generally when people respect me, it's because I'm contributing to the world and I'm making people's lives better.
You know, I really like that answer. I've never thought about it quite in that framework before of having usefulness and contribution drive what you want to be seen as. I actually think that's a really great answer. I'm going to remember that one. Okay,
yeah.
Last spiritual question here. Richard, did you have a riff on that? Did you have something to say?
No, it's just an interesting way of looking at it. I fall at this point, very confidently in that I would rather be liked, because I just find, like, if somebody doesn't like me, then they're not going to feel connected to me. So I'm not going to be able to help them in any way. And you can't really serve someone who doesn't have buy-in. And I mean, a lot of this is coming from the lens of I'm a pastor. So if somebody doesn't like me, it's over, basically. You know, if someone doesn't like me, they're not going to show up. They're not going to ask me to listen to them. You know, it seems like that kind of person-to-person connection is the first step to any sort of work that we'd be able to do together. And I don't know, I just have a history of finding the idea of respect kind of fraught, because I think that people respect people for bad reasons too, right? I respect that person because they made a lot of money. Well, if they made a lot of money, you know, committing crime or taking advantage of people, they don't deserve respect, but they often get it. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like both respect and like can be for negative reasons, which is why it's an interesting question.
Yeah, interesting. And the other interesting thing about it is, I think that in both cases, it's really important in life, if you don't want to be in a place of being a victim, to self-validate. So not to really be concerned if people like you or respect you, or, you know, to really be more concerned about what you're contributing. Because ultimately, you can't control whether people like or respect you. And if you're too concerned about whether people like you, you will start to twist yourself and not be who you really are in order to be liked. So you're turning yourself into a victim of other people, so to speak, you know, versus being self-empowered and just kind of expressing yourself to the universe and kind of letting the chips fall as they may.
Yeah, or even working on liking and respecting yourself, and that's it, and not worrying about how other people like or respect you.
Yeah, and ultimately your outer world is a mirror of your inner world. So if you don't like or respect yourself, other people won't either. You know, that's where it all has to start.
I
and
think people
that's
pick up on that intuitively.
Yeah, that's something that I have been my whole life moving away from. I innately am very much a people pleaser. And for a lot of my life, that made me kind of a chameleon. I was like, whatever you say is the best thing I've ever heard. And I don't stand for anything because then you might not like me. And that's garbage.
Well, it's a hard line to draw sometimes because you want people to you want to be able to facilitate a conversation, but you also want to be true to your values. So you do have to balance these things.
All right. Well, we have you on not to talk about general life, but more to talk specifically about breathwork. So before we get into the weeds of everything, I just want to kind of lay out a foundation for our audience about what breathwork is, how it differs from just, because in a certain way it's a type of meditation. Would you agree with that? Yeah,
yes.
It's a type of meditation that focuses on specific breathing practices that, at least with holotropic breath work, and it sounds like your type of breath work as well, it occasions a altered mental state or a non-normal mental state. Is that a good summary of what holotropic and neurodynamic breath work both are?
Yeah, it's in essence, it's using breath and music to quiet the ego mind, create what I call an expanded state of awareness, where you can actually get in touch with the deeper levels of your psyche and, unravel patterns from your past, become more aware of unconscious seeking patterns, release trauma from your system, and access that part of your psyche that is driven towards integration and wholeness. That piece of yourself that's trying to bring you to that place, but that's drowned out by your crazy ego mind that's constantly chit-chatting in your head.
Right. Now, that sounds more like breath work in general. So where does is it holotropic or holotropic? I don't want to pronounce it
holotropic.
wrong. Tropic. Okay. So how does holotropic breath work differentiate just from breath work, whether it's in meditation, just having conscientious breathing?
So holotropic breathwork, which is the initial breathwork that I was trained in, is a modality that was developed by Dr. Stan Grof, and it was based on his experiences with expanded states of awareness in LSD psychotherapy. And what he noticed was, and he was, with LSD psychotherapy, he was seeing people that were blocked in their regular therapy and talk therapy. They've been working on things for many years and hadn't really moved forward. And in just a handful of supervised LSD sessions, they were able to access some of these unconscious patterns that were causing the problems and really taking tremendous strides forward in their personal life. That it was incredibly healing. And so after it was banned, he kind of went on a search to create a modality that, without using any substance, that could access those same healing mechanisms in the deeper levels of our psyche. And that's where holotropic breathwork came from. So he studied traditional societies and modern consciousness theory, and ultimately came up with a one-day, 8 to 10 hour workshop structure,
Wow.
which would allow people to access these expanded states of awareness as deeply as possible. So that's where that structure came from. And with the underlying principle being that we have these mechanisms inside of ourselves, these self-healing mechanisms, and these mechanisms that allow us to uncover things that are holding us back in our life that we're very disconnected from because of conditionings, because of things that have happened to us in our past, because of our ego mind, because of our the thinking mind constantly drowning out this kind of inner guidance. And I call it inner guiding intelligence. You can call it higher self, connection to source. However you see it is fine, or connection to God or whatever it is. But many times that's drowned out by this ego mind constantly with anxiety, nervousness. Am I going to be liked? That type of thing. So he developed this workshop structure that would allow people to kind of drop in and access these healing states and get the information that they needed to move forward in their lives and resolve many of the issues that were facing them. And so I did that for like a decade. And then ultimately I saw that people were getting these incredible results, but my frustration with it was that it was in person, it was in large venues, people were laying out on the floor. So there was a limit to the number of people that I could really make a difference with. And it was also a huge amount of admin work to get it all together. So I could only do 4 or 5, 6 sessions a year. And so ultimately, like in one of my own breath sessions, what I saw was that part of my purpose in life, my role, what I was good at, what I could bring to the world was to allow people to feel safe when they were releasing and accessing this deeper material. But the only way that I could really access and work with enough people was to bring it online. And that's ultimately what brought me to, after 6 months of practicing with people and doing various things, creating this modality, which I call Neurodynamic Breathwork, which can be effective in an online structure with a 2-hour workshop structure. So that's where that came from.
Can I ask a question about that transition to online?
Sure.
If you're coming from a point of wanting people to feel as safe as possible, if I'm thinking about myself in a situation like this, having someone physically there while I'm undergoing a massive like spiritual or physiological transformation, having someone physically there would feel very safe to me. If you're online, it's not like you could put a hand on my shoulder and say, everything's all right. Do you notice a difficulty bridging that gap?
So my job as a facilitator is to bridge that gap and is to create a structure online where people can feel safe in going through their process. Now, certain people just respond better in an in-person session. They really like having someone there. They like having someone who can kind of hold their hand if they need it. And, then they should do in-person breath work. But what I find is that the vast majority of people are much more capable of really self-empowering themselves. And if you give them the right structure of being able to feel safe and release in an online environment. And part of that has to do with preparing them properly, with giving them the information that they need, having them understand what they might be going through and how to work with it, being available for them during the session, through private chat and Zoom, being available after the session if they need integration support, and like really doing the work to allow it to be like a safe environment for anyone that wants to participate. And the other thing is, and this is kind of one of the principles of holotropic, which I found to be true, is that your, and again, I call it inner guiding intelligence, however you see it, higher self, inner wisdom, inner intuition, will not bring something up for processing unless you're capable of processing it in the set and setting that you're in. So in other words, there's something that you may dive into in an in-person breathwork session, but if you don't feel as safe in an online session, something else will come up that you are capable of processing in that structure. So part of it is starting to trust yourself. And, most people are very disconnected from themselves. And it's not their fault. It has to do with trauma in childhood. It has to do with there were certain situations where they couldn't handle, and they've lost trust in their ability to really work through things that come up in their life.
Yeah.
And so this is, in breath work, what I found is that if they can open themselves up and come back to that place where they were originally at, where they did trust themselves before all this stuff happened, and we support them in that in the breathwork session, in a variety of ways, and they are capable and they see that they can work through some uncomfortable experiences, it allows them to bring that confidence back into their lives and to actually feel more self-empowered in their life and working through difficult situations also.
So I'm still thinking about this in comparison to its origin in LSD psychotherapy as its predecessor. And when I read that, just doing some research about it, it seemed kind of like there was a method that worked, and then it became illegal. And so the person sought out kind of the next best thing. But from the way you describe it, it sounds like that idea of personal trust and the way that your inner intelligence will bring out what you need to work on in the moment feels in some ways different than having an external substance put you in that state. So I guess my question is, would you say that it is kind of the next best thing, or in not being able to use LSD as a psychotherapy tool, people actually discovered something better in breath work, or maybe that comparison isn't valid at all?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't think it's really a framework of better or worse. And kind of to give you some more kind of color on that, I'll give you the story of how I got into breathwork in the first place, because it's a really good
great.
example.
That was going to be my next question. So you read my mind.
I grew up in a fairly just kind of normal, there wasn't really any trauma or anything like that. I had a normal childhood. I thought my parents were awesome. At least unconsciously, I wanted to mimic exactly what was going on with my parents. Have kids at the same age. My dad was an engineer. I wanted to be an engineer just like him. I was very good in school. I was very left brain oriented. That was like, I loved figuring things out. That was like, and I thought anything in life can be figured out. That was where I came from, if I worked hard enough at it. And in one area of my life that was true, which is like schoolwork. I was a straight A student. In business, I could figure out problems, and I was getting promoted and making lots of money. But in the area of my life that was more kind of, I would call right brain oriented, like relationships, to be honest, I was a miserable failure. And I mean, not even just like a minor failure, a miserable failure. And because one of my goals was I want to be married like in my 30s, like my parents. It's like, so it was really important for me to have a good relationship. And
Sure.
Every relationship that I had not only failed fairly quickly, but also failed fairly dramatically and hurt feelings. It didn't end well.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And I just kept thinking, I can figure this out. I'm smart. I figured everything else out. I can figure this out. And so, at the stage in my own personal development that I was at back then, I said, okay, it's got to be that I just haven't found the right woman. These, whatever it was, 10 women that I've done, they're just not the right people. I've just got to keep looking. And again, at that point in my personal development, I wasn't far enough along to really understand that the only common element in all those relationships was not them, it was me. So I didn't get that it was my issue, not their issue, right? So I kept thinking, okay, I just have to keep trying and trying and trying. And I kept trying and failing. And then ultimately, I got to be 32 years old, which is the age that my father got married. And I said, okay, time to get married. And so, and again, this was unconscious. I didn't know that I was thinking time to get married. So I was with a woman at that time. So I just said, okay, let's marry her. It's time to go. And
Wow.
And again, I mean, consciously, I'm just thinking, oh, she's really nice. Things are going okay. She lasted a couple months longer than the average. And so we got married. And
Still in this left brain context.
yeah. And then, as you can imagine, that didn't turn out well either, because I hadn't figured out what the issue was. So got divorced a short time later. And then that really kind of broke up my whole worldview in a sense, because I was off the track. I wasn't going to get married at the right time. I wanted to have 2 kids. I wanted to have kids at a certain age. It was like it kind of exploded what I saw my life was supposed to look at.
Yeah.
And so that really shook me up. It was like my first real shake-up experiences of starting to kind of look into my inner world and really say, are these things that I really want or not? Or are these really conditioning? And, as I started to go down that path, I met a woman that, again, I was going to try again, but I thought, oh, maybe she's the one. She's great, but she was still living with her ex-boyfriend, and I'm going, okay, how do I get her out of the house so I can really see if, maybe we're a good match, who knows? And so at a certain point she said, Michael, I'd love to go down to Peru and go into the rainforest. I want to see pink dolphins. And so in my mind I'm going, I don't think pink dolphins exist, but if I can get her away for a week, let's do it so I can see if this is really a happening thing or not. I said, okay, let's go see pink dolphins. So we end up going down there, and by the way, there really are pink dolphins. I just had no idea at the time. So we went down there, and it was just the two of us, and there was this woman that had bought some land out in the Amazon to preserve it, basically. So
that's great.
So the trees wouldn't get cut down and that type of thing. And so when we were about to go out, she said, there's this local shaman that I can send out with you, and he'll stay there with you for the week. And so I'm thinking, oh, why not? That could be interesting. Bring him along. This little guy, 4'10", didn't speak any English. And so we're out there, and the first night he comes to us and through a translator says, would you guys like to participate in a religious ceremony down here? So I never just say yes to those kind of things. I'm like the science guy, right?
Okay.
I have to know what I'm getting into, right? So I said, well, what is it? So he goes, oh, it's very simple. I go out into the rainforest and I grab some vines and leaves, put them into a big cauldron and boil them up, and you drink it. Now, my initial response is, I'm a chemical engineer, right? You mix 0.54 grams of this and 0.25 grams of this. You do not, in any circumstances, drink a witch's brew in the rainforest with people that don't speak English, a 4-hour canoe ride from anywhere. That's out of the question.
Oh man, but what a story it's giving you though.
So I'm ready to go, you got to be kidding. But this woman I'm with, she goes, yeah, we have to do this. This is awesome. So now it's like, Richard, this whole thing about being liked, came into my head. I'm down here with this woman to see, this is a week in my life, to see whether maybe we can actually be in a relationship. And if I say no, that'll be the end. I'll be a total wimp in her eyes. But
Sure.
the other part of my brain is going, this is crazy. Do not do this. You might die. Do not do this. So this battle in my head's going. And then ultimately, I just came to a place, and this is really one of the first times in my life where I just kind of spontaneously did something, even though my thinking mind said, don't do it. I said, okay, whatever. I'll drink this stuff. If I die, at least it's in the rainforest. I've had a pretty good life. I'll die in a beautiful environment, and that'll be that. So as you've probably figured out, it was ayahuasca, and I never had a substance before. It's the first time. I didn't even know what it was. If you'd have told me it was ayahuasca, I wouldn't have known what that even meant.
Wow.
And so
right in the deep end.
Yeah.
You did not tiptoe around that.
And so, but I had this mind-blowing experience, and it was really the first time that I'd ever really felt connected to the universe. I'd always felt like it was kind of, I had to protect myself. It was kind of me against the world. And that, I could move forward, but I always had to stay protected. Just so people wouldn't come after me or fight with me or do, like to protect myself against that there were enemies out there. And it was the first time that I really had this kind of inkling that, maybe the world is not happening to me. Maybe, just maybe, in some way it's happening for me.
Mm.
And so I had this amazing experience. And so when I got back, I'm going, okay, if I can have that kind of experience of connection to the world with a substance, the receptors have got to be there in my brain. There's got to be another way to do it. There has to be. And that's what kind of put me on this search where I, got into shamanism and a bunch of other stuff. And that's what ultimately led me to holotropic breathwork, because, of Stan's background with starting with LSD, psychotherapy, and then creating breathwork.
Wow.
And so I started doing breathwork and had some incredibly amazing experiences also. And within probably about 8 sessions, I got to the bottom of this whole thing about relationships that have been plaguing me my entire life. And I actually went back in one of these sessions, and you can actually have visuals where you go back into your childhood and see things from different perspectives or see things that you've forgotten in breathwork.
Wow.
And I went back into my childhood and saw this moment where my mother was talking to me about her experience as a child. And both of my parents are German Jews, and so they, had to run for their lives from the Nazis.
Wow.
And especially my mother, her father had been a World War I hero. He'd gotten the Iron Cross for bravery. One of her ancestors had paid Napoleon to go around the village and not burn it down and kill everybody. He was like the rich guy in town. And then from one day to the next, they had to run for their lives. So they didn't tell me this, but the unconscious decision I made is the world is an unsafe place.
Mm.
And that had been running my life and my relationships for 3 decades or 4 decades. But since it was unconscious, I couldn't work with it. I could, logically try to figure out, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. But as long as I had this unconscious thinking pattern, the world is an unsafe place, I couldn't get anywhere. And all of a sudden, I just saw, holy cow, I've been creating this reality in my relationships my entire life. And not only that, I've been driving these women crazy. Because I drop into a certain point and then just kind of shut the door. And they wanted to go further. So they were extremely frustrated. So actually, like my first reaction to it, I went into this kind of, depression of how much damage I'd been doing. And because I wasn't aware of these unconscious thinking patterns. I was like crying. It was like intense. I've got to fix this stuff. I've got to apologize to everybody. And, to really take responsibility for it. And I went through that, but ultimately, once I got through that, I saw, okay, this is now my opportunity. It's my opportunity to create the relationship of my dreams and start working with these unconscious patterns. I don't have to let a 5-year-old run my life, a decision that I made when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And it just switched from being, I went from kind of beating myself up to putting myself in a place of feeling more self-empowered to ultimately have the tools to create the relationship that I wanted my entire life. And it didn't happen overnight, but it took some time for me to shift because I've had this neural pathway I'd been developing for decades.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I ended up in this amazing relationship. I've been in it for 10 years, and which is much longer than the 9 months was with my record previously. And it completely changed my life.
Wow.
So getting back to your question, to me, breath work is serves more purposes. Because not only can you get these, healing experiences, working with unconscious patterns, but it's also an experience of self-empowerment. Because you don't need a chemical to have these experiences. You just need to connect. And you already have all the answers you need inside of you. And so it's just a question of, going through your life, creating a life of trying to more and more connect to who you really are. Who's your authentic self? And I believe that everybody has a gift to bring to the world. A unique gift that no one else can, based on their history, based on the struggles they've had, based on the failures that they've had. And at least for me, like the more I can support people in getting more in touch with their authentic self and seeing what gift they have to bring to the world, to actually make the world a better place, that's really what my role in life is and what my job is, to allow people to be self-empowered. And seeing that just with breath and music, you can empower yourself and uncover all these unconscious conditionings. And when we do surveys, more than half the people that do neurodynamic breathwork say that they're more clear on their purpose in life through breathwork.
Wow.
And that they feel more connected to source, more connected to their intuition, to their creativity, and they feel more calm and centered in their lives. And it's the empowering part of it is that they don't need anything else. They just need breath and music. And to me, if you can create an experience with breath and music, it's supposed to happen. Versus if you do it with a substance, you can get healing experiences. But it's like, what do you come out of it with? You come out of it with a healing experience, but also this neural pathway. I can have these experiences, but I need this substance.
Right.
So again, it's like, it's a mixed bag, because you're creating this healing, but in a sense, you're a victim of the substance too. You're creating a dependence, just like a dependence on sex, or a dependence on work, or a dependence on drugs, kind of thing.
Right.
So to me, it's like, some people maybe they're just really just stuck in their ways, and they need like an atomic explosion. So they need, like ayahuasca or LSD or whatever, just to kind of shake them up out of their worldview and their thinking patterns. But to me, on a more long-term basis, breath work can be much more powerful in allowing people to really manifest the life that they want.
Wow.
That's thank you. That's really interesting.
That was thank you so much for sharing all that too. Like, and going into that vulnerability, that was an amazing story to hear and experience to share with us. So really thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
A question that came up during your story for me, you talk about the phrase that really stuck with me is the idea of maybe the world isn't happening to me, it's happening for me. Mm-hmm. And you talked about your internal process, knowing what you need, and that idea of self-empowerment. And you talked about people experiencing a greater connection to a source of some kind. How much is the process of breath work metaphysical for you? You have a lot of history and background in science. How much is it? I'm training my brain. I'm training my consciousness to better self-actualize. And how much does it have a spiritual element?
I think it's very different for each person. There's some people who are, are completely science oriented and who don't really connect with spirituality at all. And when they do breath work, it can be a very different kind of experience than someone who's on the other side, so to speak. There is a physiological component to how breath work works. There is some science behind it, which for many people, they won't try it if there is no science behind it. Mm-hmm. And when I was growing up, I wouldn't have tried it. Mm-hmm. I would have said, this is way too woo-woo for me. This is too far out. And there was no science back then. But now there is some actual science on how it actually works in your brain and how it can quiet the ego mind and the physiological changes that it has. And it really works with three different components. There's a physiological component where basically it's in essence doing a deeper breathing and a little bit faster than normal, to music, and just allowing whatever wants to happen to happen. So you're kind of really just surrendering to the process and not trying to control it or have judgments or expectations about what's happening. And so the first aspect is physiological. The second is psychological. Because no matter what happens physiological, if you don't give yourself permission to release and permission to surrender, the experience will not happen. Your self-talk, what you say to yourself, is incredibly powerful. Because like the job that you give your brain, it will try to work on. So if you have self-talk that I'm not worthy, your brain will pick out proof to prove that. So you have to be really careful how you talk to yourself. And in breath work, we have this whole structure where we go through a process where people are giving themselves permission to release, saying it's okay to let go of some of this stuff and to just surrender to the process. And so that's the second component that mixes in to let it work. And the third thing is the music. And the music is designed, it has a structure to support people in diving into whatever process they need to have. And sometimes it can be an emotional release from stuck emotions, from grief that they're holding in their system and that's holding them back, not just emotionally, but also physically, where it starts to create physical problems. It can be, looking at things differently, that happen in childhood, seeing it from a different perspective. All those things can happen, but all of those components really support the process. So different people, depending on where they come from, the experience can kind of manifest in a different way. And sometimes people who aren't spiritual at all, once they have, what I would call a spiritual experience, that opens up a whole new vista for them in terms of looking at their life. Right. And they start to see that, there's a whole aspect of life that they haven't really been exploring.
Yeah. I think that the second point on like self-talk is really important, because I think that can be really subconscious for a lot of people as well. And I've noticed that for myself as well. And one thing I've said before is, like, if I talk to my friends the way I talk to myself, they wouldn't be friends with me. And we can't talk to ourselves like that because we are our own best friends. We're stuck with
Right.
ourselves forever. So like we need to love who we're with, who we're stuck with, you know? And getting back to this religious experience, I'm curious because you are a more left-minded, dominant person coming at things from a scientific, logical background. So for you personally, has this opened up a spiritual door of sorts? Have you become a more spiritual person? And how has that affected your like day-to-day faith or belief?
Yet, to me, the important part is that I become more self-aware. And, given that your outer world is a mirror of your inner world, you can't change things in the world by trying to change the pieces, like by changing your friends or changing your mother or father or changing other things that are happening in the outside world. The only way you can change your outer world is to change your inner world. So to me, it's really given me impetus to spend as much time as possible doing inner work. And breathwork is just one of the modalities. Like it's not the only way to, many people do meditation and it's very powerful for them. It's not the only pathway, but it's a very powerful pathway because first experience out of the box, you can have an incredibly profound experience that can change your life. It's not like you have to practice for years and years to be really good at it. And but the other piece of it is, it isn't just having an insight. That's step one. The next step is integrating it into your life. And that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, is actually creating practices in your life to actually manifest like what you've seen, during your breathwork session. And it's, first becoming aware that your outer world is a reflection of your inner world is incredibly powerful, because then you can start to look into your outer world and use what you see and how you interpret your outer world to do your inner work on a moment-by-moment basis. You don't have to be in a breathwork session. And so we also like to give people the tools to go back into their life and start to use their life experiences to do their inner world, of their inner work, and not just have it be these life experiences are happening to me. Like, for instance, you can use your emotions as tools to kind of see what's happening in your unconscious mind. That's just one example. If you get activated by something, it's not the thing in the outside world, that incident that's activating you, because everybody responds differently. In a way that, like, if someone cuts in front of you in traffic, one person will be super activated, another person it won't bother. And it's more about what meaning have you created out of it. One person has created a meaning, this person's disrespecting me. And the other person has created a totally different meaning. And so your thoughts are the things that ultimately then create your emotions around it. So if you can start using your emotions to actually see, okay, what's really going on here? Why did I react to this? When have I felt this before? What was the first time I ever felt this? And you can start to see this string of experiences that you can actually see and heal once you bring them to consciousness, just by seeing what emotionally activates you in your life. And you can do that in all different things in your life. That's just one little example of how you can start to take some of these tools and use them in your life to really move forward on a day-by-day basis.
So it sounds like for you personally, and you said that it's different for everyone, that for you personally, it's more of a self-reflective psychological experience and either not so much a metaphysical spiritual experience, or it's not important whether it is or not. The important focus is on the kind of self-actualization psychological process. Is that
well,
accurate?
To me, life is a spiritual experience. If you come from a specific space, it really is, how do you see life? And again, if you see life as this amazing adventure that's happening for you and is a constant learning experience, every moment will feel spiritual in that sense. Because it's an opening, it's a possible opening for you into who you really are. If you see life as being a victim of life and things are happening to you and you're a victim, then it doesn't matter what you do. Life will not feel like a spiritual experience. It'll feel like a victimizing experience, so to speak. So to me, like the spiritual aspect of it comes from the perspective, the worldview that you come to life with. So that's to me where the work needs to be done.
Yeah, and that sort of relates to some of the things that you mention on your page describing your work as promoting radical freedom, right? And that is opposed to a lot of from my experience talking with people that are purely anti-metaphysics, it's often a very determinist mindset, which can be really useful for people. We've talked with people that are determinist and really see how it's valuable in their life. But it sounds like this idea of radical freedom is kind of counter to determinism. And I don't know, from my worldview, it seems like the idea of human freedom and free will is innately a spiritual reality.
Yes.
And so even if the question isn't about, is there a God or some higher being or some guiding force, just the presence of human consciousness and free will is metaphysical. Is that accurate to your worldview?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that what you're saying is 100% correct. And the ultimate pathway to true freedom is really being able to manifest what you want into the world. And, without being held back by these unconscious thinking patterns and by decisions that you've made in your past and becoming more aware of them. And it comes to an interesting perspective, which I think is incredibly important. And so I'm going to ask you guys a question now. And that is, do you feel like that the past is something you no longer control? That is fixed and you can learn lessons from it, but you don't control it at all.
Yes, I do think that. I think
Luke takes the bait.
I'm gonna take the bait, and I'm gonna defend the bait because I do, in the sense that we cannot time travel. I cannot go back and change, what my mom or dad said to me at any given age. I can change how I grow from it and how my future will be based from my past, but I can't change the facts of my history.
What would you say if I told you that you do that all the time?
That
you
I change
actually
the facts
are a
of-
time traveler, yes.
Well, I would believe you that memories are unreliable and that I might have fabricated some stuff from my past.
Well, it's even more dramatic than that. It's that every time, and I'll just give you an example of a study that they did.
Yeah,
they
please.
took 100 people and gave them a questionnaire with end of life decisions, like if you were on a ventilator, would you want to stay alive or not stay alive? And they took them and gave them the questionnaire. A year later, gave them the same questionnaire. When they gave them the questionnaire the year later, 23% completely shifted their answers. Like for instance, with the ventilator, they might have said, yes, I want to be taken off. Absolutely not. Which, people do change their mind. That's not that interesting. But the interesting part is, of those 23%, 75% insisted that they'd answered the same way the year before. So they basically fabricated from 1 year before how they'd answered that question. And the way the brain works is it hates dissonance. So if you change your worldview, your brain will go back and rearrange the facts of the past to agree with your current worldview. So you actually, in this moment, everything you do, every time you change your worldview, you change your projected future, and you also change your past, because you see it from a completely different perspective, and actually change your experience of your past, and even reinterpret the things that happened. So, that can be disconcerting in one sense. Well, can I really trust my memories? And the answer is more or less you really can't.
Right.
But the second piece of it is it's incredibly empowering. Because most people feel like their past isn't a good thing. Their past is something that holds them back. Something that happened to me when I was 15 years old or whatever it is something that's keeping them from fully being who they can be in their life. And, once you start to see that by changing your current worldview, like your brain starts to align your past to conform to that worldview, it can really push you forward in a very powerful way and take away that whole kind of feel more self-empowered instead of feeling a victim of your past. And it's kind of a radical concept because Most people feel when they do surveys that when you remember something, it's kind of like you took a picture of it and you're kind of bringing up that picture each time. And that's just not how the brain works. It isn't designed that way. So, once you start to understand more about how the brain works and how memories work and how perception works, you can start to use that to actually power yourself forward and really take a step out of things that were holding you back before. And one example is like, for instance, in a breathwork session, there was a guy who had been doing breathwork with me for a bit of time. And he had this experience where he went back into his past when he was a child, when he'd had this very abusive incident that happened to it from one of his parents, where he'd almost died. And he went back into that experience. And this had been holding him back his entire life. Because again, he felt, his was more dramatic, but he felt the world was an unsafe place. If you can't trust the people that are supposed to take care of you, who can you trust? He'd had problems with relationships. He'd had problems with, just because of this incident that had happened to him in his past. And so he went back to that incident. And what he saw was that in the moment that it was happening, even though he knew that it wasn't right, this wasn't about saying, oh, this was a good thing or this, but what he saw was that in the moment it was happening, he actually wasn't afraid. He felt this sense of divine protection, that he said, this is not right. I know this isn't right, but I'm going to be okay. I have the protection of the universe. And once he saw that, after he came out of the experience, it shifted everything for him. Because instead of where he'd come, before, where he'd come out of it from a place of shame and, what's wrong with me? Why did I deserve this? And the world's an unsafe place. It shifted to, oh my God, there was an incredible gift that I got from this that I'd totally forgotten about. And it was a message for me. And, and he started to work with, coming from this new perspective, I'm protected. No matter what happens,
Right.
The world is a safe place. I can learn from something and move through it.
So why do you think unlocking memories like that, we need breath work or something to get us there? Like, even though breath work is more internal than a substance, we talked about that. But why is it so difficult for people to access something like that and have those big realizations?
The difficult part is because our brain has defense mechanisms.
Right.
And in the same way, like even when we're in therapy, we're not totally honest because we want the therapist to like us. So if we did something horrible, it's unlikely we're going to talk to the therapist about it.
Yeah.
Or even childhood trauma, we may not talk to the therapist about it because we're ashamed of it. We're
I have that
ashamed
with
that it happened
doctors a
to
lot.
us.
I always feel like I need to apologize for going to the doctor, like I'm inconveniencing them.
Yeah. So in breath work, and again, this is not just in breath work, there's other ways to access this stuff, but in breath work, when you're kind of physiologically partially deactivating this part of your brain which has the ego mind which creates the constructs of self and ego with these defense mechanisms, you can better connect to these things in a way that feels safe, where these defense mechanisms saying, I can't handle this. Oh no, what's going to happen if this comes up? No, I don't want to take a chance on feeling this. Because it's still, your brain is still back when you were 5 years old, when you couldn't handle it.
Right.
And so you dissociated, or whatever you did to protect yourself, which was exactly the right thing to do at that point, what you needed to do. And it's kind of like when stuff happens to you, there's only two ways that you can kind of deal with it. One is to blame it on the person that did it to you. But if it's like your parents, that's unsafe.
Yeah.
Because you can't lash out against your parents. You're dependent on them for your survival.
Right.
Or there's something wrong with me. But if I could only fix it, it wouldn't happen to me again. So that's where people go. And that's part of the whole thing about not loving yourself and not connecting to yourself in that way from the time when you were a child, if those kind of things happen to you.
Wow.
So in breath work, it's kind of like you can quiet the field and realize I'm not a 5-year-old child anymore. I'm an adult and I can handle things better. I have more resources. And again, if it's not ready to be processed, it won't be brought up. But if it is being brought up, you can be confident that you are now have the resources to work with it in a more healthy way, and not like have this, 5-year-old healthy reaction at that point. be the same way that you're reacting when you're 55 years old.
Wow. So do you think working with that perception and memory, going back and having the breath work help you revisit these things, helps sort of clear up the fog around the defense mechanisms that you've put up with that memory or experience or whatever, and to see it, I don't want to say more objectively, because everything is subjective in our memories and everything, but help see it from who you are now more clearly, rather than having it be mixed up in all these changing years of you shifting as a person, and be able to revisit it and come to terms with it more clearly.
Yes.
Am I getting that right? Because I
Yeah,
wanna make
100%.
sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
because like you're revisiting it from your present self.
Yeah.
And, whereas normally if you're in an ordinary state of consciousness, when you revisit it, you're revisiting it because it's imprinted as an experience from being 5 years old. So you're revisiting it from that 5-year-old's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really difficult to take a step back from it
Yeah.
and not get hooked into this because it's imprinted in your brain. It was an intense experience.
Yeah.
And so it's imprinted not only the experience, but the emotion that you had around the experience. They're imprinted together. The things that really imprint intensely are the ones that have strong emotions attached to them. Those are the ones that you remember the most.
Yeah. If
So
Richard, if I could just real quick.
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, on a personal note, a lot of this stuff is really connecting with me, and I won't dive in too much in the details because it would take a long time and it'd be its own session. But I think I've just been realizing more and more as an adult now that I have a lot of things when I was a kid with my parents' divorce that I told myself for a long time that I was fine and things didn't affect me, and I repressed a lot of feelings and emotions from the time when I was a baby through my young adult development, and I think a lot of those things are showing up in different ways. So I don't know, I can just see how a process like this would be really useful for me to be able to revisit my childhood in this way, and I think that could be really healing for me, honestly.
And even in the case of a divorce, many times a child, even though they're not conscious of it, feels on some level it was partially their fault.
Oh, I have a lot of that.
And it's internalized, even though it wasn't their fault. Like they didn't make their parents get divorced.
And even
so,
I can know that rationally, but emotionally, I think there's still something of that there. And I
Right.
can know for certain that it's not. And I know that. But to feel that is something different, I think.
Yeah, and things that are created in an expanded state of awareness, like when you have a deep emotion about something and it's imprinted in that way in your body, it's very difficult to work through them when you're just thinking about it and trying to figure it out because it's imprinted in your body. So it's like you have to, and breath work is more what I call an embodiment meditation because it pushes you into your body and gets you out of your thinking mind. So you can logically understand something, but it's not necessarily useful because ultimately you have to go back into your body and release the imprint and work with the imprint and allow yourself to fully feel what you felt back then in
Yeah.
order to let it release out of your body.
That hits right on the mark with me because I am a person, and a lot of your story was really connecting with me because I am a person who I want to sit down with these thoughts and ideas and be like, okay, I'm going to figure these out. I'm going to think about them. I'm going to understand them. I'm going to overcome them, and I'm going to be great. And I want to sit down and do this like it's homework almost. And so yeah, this just hits right at home with me, and I know, and I'm coming to realize how these things are actually stored in our bodies and our experiences. And yeah, this is really fascinating stuff that I feel really grateful to get to learn about more, even just now in my present life. Like even last week, I had a session with someone who helped me sort of unlock some body emotions that are stored. And yeah, I just have never known about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I can't really emphasize enough how important it is to do inner work. And breath work again is one way to do it. Meditation practice is another way. I love breath work because it's embodied. Like to me, I have a difficult time meditating. First of all, I'm very left brain oriented, and second of all, it's more of a mental process for me. For me, embodied release processes are much more effective. But it's kind of like there's an old story. There's a guy at the entrance to a village, and this guy comes walking in and says, what are people like in this village? And he goes, well, what are people like in the village that you came from? And he goes, oh, they're horrible. They lie to each other. They steal. They cheat. I'm just trying to escape. And he goes, well, bad news for you. They're exactly the same way here. And he goes, oh, man, I'm wasting my time. And then so he walks by. Next guy comes in. And he goes, what are the people like here? And he says, well, what were the people like in your own village? He says, oh, they're amazing. Everybody loves each other. They support each other. It's like we're a little tribe. It's like even like when children grow up, it's like everybody supports it. He says, well, that's exactly the way they are in the village you're coming to. So, but the point is, though, you see the world through your lens. If your inner world is compassionate, you will see the world as compassionate, because that's what your brain's going to pick out, and that's what you're going to. And people being around you will start to be more compassionate, because they'll feel that from you. They'll feel your compassion radiating out. So when you change your inner world, you actually change your outer world. You can change others by changing yourself. You know, you can never change other people by yelling at them or telling them they're full of baloney or this or that. And I think that's why most relationships fail. You know, because when people work on what we call like the horizontal instead of the vertical, where they're like projecting on the cause of their internal states onto the outside world. So if you're having a conversation with your girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, you know, whoever it is, and you get upset, you're more likely to say, you're disrespecting me. Why are you saying that? You know, you always say that stuff to me. You know, instead of when you're working on a more inner work perspective, if you're activated, something's going on inside of you that you need to look at. It wasn't what the other person said. It was just waiting to come out. And your psyche is giving you the opportunity to heal in that moment. So rather than just, you know, like reacting, just close your eyes for a minute, see what's going on inside. Say, what's happening here? What's being activated? And, you know, sometimes you can see, okay, it's a feeling of insecurity. It's you know, whatever it is, or when was the first time I felt this? You know, there's a whole process you can do. And you can learn something about yourself in that moment that can serve you in moving forward in your life. So when you treat people around you as your teachers, as your Buddhas, as your Christ, as your, you know, however you see it,
Sure.
rather than as your tormentors or your enemies, it completely shifts your relationships to those people. You know, just imagine you're in a relationship with your girlfriend and you're getting into these fights all the time, and your girlfriend's saying, you know, why don't you take out the trash, or why don't you do this, or whatever it is, and you're going, lay off of me, I do, you know, like, you know, that's the dynamic. And the next time she says that, you close your eyes and just look at it and say, oh my God, I just went back to my childhood when my parents always kept telling me to do things and I hated it. You know, now I can work with it. Thank you so much for supporting me in my inner growth, for being my teacher. I mean, just think on how that would shift the relationship and shift the other person's reaction. First of all, they might say, are you on drugs? Because they wouldn't believe that
Who is
person
this?
shift like this. Who is this person? But so, you know, that's why, you know, some people say, I don't have time to do inner work. You don't have time not to do it.
Yeah.
You know, that's a much more effective way to change your reality of the quality of your relationships with your children, with your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, and wife, the quality of your experience of life, you know, the quality of your experience of work. And that's the whole other thing, looking at what are your definitions of life? What are your definitions of work and that type of thing? That can be incredibly powerful in seeing why you may not be happy in those areas. You know, many times we grow up, like, for instance, looking at what's your definition of life. When we first are born, you know, we're born from a space where we were a fetus, where for 9 months we didn't have to do anything. The world just took care of us. We didn't have to even ask for anything. It just happened. We were fed through an umbilical cord. You know, we were in this warm oceanic space. You know, it was just this, you know, unless your mom was on drugs or tried to abort you or something like that. But in most cases. And all of a sudden you pop into the world and you can't make your needs met. You know, your mom doesn't know what you need. You can cry, but if you cry, are you hungry? Are you tired? Are you hot? Are you cold? So no matter what you do, like, your mom can't get it right. You know, because she really doesn't know. So the first thing is you project this thing on your mom. She's not doing a good job. You know, for 9 months I was in this amazing space, and now, you know, this sucks. You know, I'm crying and crying, and she's not taking care of me. She's not meeting my needs. And so it's kind of like this whole thing about I'm dependent on the world to meet my needs. And if it doesn't, I'm going to blame the world. In this case, it's blaming your mom. And that's a thinking pattern that every child has when they first are born. And ultimately, many people see that and shift it, but many people don't. And they're still, when they're 40 or 50 years old, part of their definition of life is that life is here to make me happy. Life is here to, whatever it is. And so you bring into a relationship. Relationships are to make me happy. It's my girlfriend's job to make me happy. If she doesn't do it, she's failing. Rather than what can I bring to this relationship? It's like, what can I take from it instead of what can I bring from it? And just that one thing makes all the difference in a relationship in terms of, how happy you are, how happy the other person is, and the quality of your life going forward, because your relationship is the most important thing. And life is all about relationships. It's about with your boss, with your children, with your grandparents, with your parents, with everybody. So just shifting from what can I bring in this moment, what can I bring to this relationship in every moment, rather than what can I get from it, just completely shifts your whole perspective and your whole experience of life.
Yeah, and makes you more present in the process.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you.
Yeah, very much, very much.
But before we close out here, I see we're chugging through our time, as it often is.
know.
But there's a couple other things that I really want to dig into, and one is we've talked a lot about the effect of breath work and the result and what you can take away from it. But I'd love if you'd be willing to just walk us through kind of what does it feel like for you? What is the actual experience? And you've talked about a couple of times it being an embodied experience as opposed to, meditation that you've tried. So what does it feel like? And I know people talk about it brings on a psychedelic effect. Has that been your experience? And having done kind of, jump into the deep end of doing ayahuasca in the jungle, how does it compare to that? I guess, how is it different? What does it feel like? Those sort of questions are the ones burning in my mind right now.
Right. So, first of all, like the structure of a neurodynamic breathwork session, I'm just going to talk about online right now, because that's where most of it's happening because of the pandemic. Sure. It's a 2-hour experience. And the first piece is an introductory talk so that people understand exactly what may happen, what types of experiences you can have, what to expect, how to work with certain things, how to reach out for support, that whole thing. Then we go through the breathing technique for neurodynamic breathwork, which is, in essence, you start with doing full deep breathing in and out through your mouth. And again, this is not a breathwork technique you'd use in your everyday life. It's really designed for this type of breathwork experience.
Very intensive, specific, yeah.
And you breathe either at normal speed or a little faster than normal, and you do connected breathing. So you're always breathing in or breathing out. You're not holding the breath.
Oh.
And you follow that breathing technique for some people it takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. But at a certain point, what happens is your body just kind of takes over and finds its own rhythm. And once it does that, you kind of follow what your body wants to do. So, for the rest of the hour. And the types of experiences people have is, first of all, we encourage people that there's 3 ways to dive as deeply as possible into the process. One is through emotions. So if emotions want to come up, you want to let them come. You want to let them be as big as they want to be. You want to let them release. And second of all, sounds. Sounds are your body's most effective way to release stress and tension. And normally we have a conditioning around making loud sounds. Like when we're children, if we start screaming and yelling, our parents say, don't bother people, keep it down kind of thing. So many people have this unconscious conditioning around you bother people if you make loud sounds. So we really encourage people, if your body wants to release through sound, just let it happen. Many people are screaming or yelling or toning to the music or whatever it is and have this amazing release. And the third is movement. You can do it either sitting up or laying down. And many times your body wants to move. Again, just to release stress. That's why we feel so good after we exercise and feel so calm, because that's how your body also releases stress or tension. So we encourage people to, if their sounds want to come up, go for it. If movement wants to come to happen, and just to kind of really surrender to what wants to happen, not to try to think it out of what should be happening or what type of experience you want to have. And there's an incredibly wide range of experiences. And there's no better or worse. Some people have a very body intensive experience where they have tensions in their body that release, and then they get hot or they get cold, which is all ways of your body, releasing. Or sometimes they can have where just intense emotions comes out, grief, just this almost endless grief, or just even laughing, or they just laugh for 20 minutes. And all that stuff can be coming out of their body. And many times, like the first session or two is mostly body, because we have so much of this stuff that's stuck in our body. That's kind of the layer that has to release like an onion before other things can happen. So that's one type of experience. Other people, they don't move at all. They're just more, they can have a visual experience, say, where they go back into their childhood, or have other things happen visually to them, or sometimes it can be an LSD-ish type experience where they see fractals and that type of thing. I get visuals about 20% of the time. Sometimes people can have experiences where they feel like they're in a past life, and they're actually having some kind of a healing from something that is impacting them now, but they feel like was actually created in a past life, or have ancestral healing. Sometimes people have an experience of feeling like dissolved into the universe, or being kind of floating in the stars. And there is no better or worse. Sometimes people, during the entire time, their body just trembles. And anytime you have trauma, it's like, this is even true with animals. Like if a deer crosses the road and gets hit by a car, and it's still okay, the first thing it'll do is shake for several minutes, because that's how it releases trauma, just by shaking intensely. And it's the same thing with our bodies. One of the ways of releasing trauma is by trembling, shaking. So you might have that. So all of those experiences are possible. And that's why it's really important to tell people, don't try to create a specific type of experience. You'll get what you need. And the experience is, every time you do breath work, it's a different experience. So if you did it today and then did it tomorrow, it'd be totally different.
Wow.
And then at the end, there's a sharing group, which is also really important, where people get to share their experiences. Generally there's people from maybe 10, 20 different countries, and anywhere from 50 to 150 different people. And it's an amazing experience of seeing people be open and vulnerable. They're in a very gentle space, and just super heartwarming. And also many times other people's experiences can open up new vistas and new kind of understandings of your own experience. So that's kind of the structure of the workshop. And you're doing it in your own space. You're doing it like laying down in bed or sitting on a chair. You can keep your video off if you want to, so you can do it in your pajamas if you want to, whatever. So you can do it comfortably. It's very inexpensive. We do 20 live sessions every month. People can choose the times that work for them. We have a subscription program, so they can just do it for a few dollars a session if they want to. And that ultimately comes from, my kind of understanding from my breathwork session, that it's part of my mission in life to bring breathwork to the world and to support a change in world consciousness. And so it was my goal to make something convenient, inexpensive, that anybody in the world could do. Is all you really need is an internet connection.
That's fantastic. I do want to make sure we ask, just in case, are there any dangers in doing this? Is this harmful? Do you recommend people don't try this on their own? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So there's two levels of that. First of all, there's certain contraindications, we call, which if you have some of these things for a variety of reasons, you're not advised to do breath work. And I don't know if you want me to go through a whole list, but there's certain physiological and psychological contraindications.
Okay, so people should just make sure you do your research before.
Yeah, and we give them emails, and we go through all those during the session. During the intro talk, we go through the whole list of contraindications.
Nice.
For instance, there's a couple of psychiatric diagnoses like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. If you've there's certain physiological things. If you have like cardiovascular issues, like a bad heart, because sometimes people can get moved very intensely. So it's stuff like that. And so we make sure that people know exactly what the contraindications are before, so that they can participate safely.
And do people need? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do people need an observer or a sitter during this, or is it safe enough to do by themselves?
I'd say 98% of people that work with me online, and which is, I think it's been about 45,000 people now, do it by themselves. But there are people like husband and wife or whatever who want to do it with each other and then kind of share with each other afterwards. Where they're both breathing, and there are people who like a sitter. Like in holotropic breath work in person, that you always have a sitter. Mm-hmm. That's why it's a 10-hour day, because there's 2 breathing sessions. And, like you flip roles, so you're a sitter and you're a breather. And, some people, maybe it's their first breath work session, and you know what, I want to have a sitter. So I want to have someone, if I put my hand out there, hold my hand. And, and they'll be there to, comfort me if I need to, or hold me or whatever. And, if that feels right to them, then I would strongly encourage them, get a sitter. This whole thing is about starting to check in with yourself and trust yourself more and reconnect with your own ability and your own power, and start to listen to what is this kind of inner guiding intelligence, what feels right, what does my intuition say? Mm-hmm. If your intuition is have a sitter, have a sitter. If your intuition is I should start with in-person breath work, start with in-person breath work. Listen to that little voice, and see what feels right to you. And also ultimately, I can't tell someone whether it's best to, as a first session, do it online without a sitter. It's really ultimately their first step in starting to empower themselves and listening to what feels right to them.
Thank you. I think that's really, really useful. I have one final question. Richard, do you have any questions before I ask my last one?
No, go for it.
All right. It's a very, very more on the surface one. I mean, you are out in LA, so I have to ask, do you have any celebrity clients you can name drop for us?
Well, actually, that's another thing about breath work. Like during the sessions, we don't record the sessions.
Okay.
And we also, people have to agree that everything that happens is confidential. They don't tape anything.
So you don't want to break your confidentiality.
Otherwise people don't feel safe to release.
Yeah.
So it's not even just if they're a celebrity or not a celebrity. Sometimes people, they get in touch with some really deep childhood stuff that they share about, and it's not something that they want out in the world. And it's something that they're sharing because they feel like they're in a safe space. And if they don't feel safe, they won't have an experience. So, since we have these rules that people have to agree by, so that they, not only do they feel safe, but also that the group feels safe. And part of that is not like what happens in neurodynamic breathwork stays in neurodynamic. It's kind of like Las Vegas, but it's neurodynamic breathwork.
Gotcha. So what you're saying is Kanye West. Okay, we'll move on. Fair enough. No, but thank you so much for taking your time to be with us. I know you're a busy man. You have lots of things going on, but we really appreciate you carving out some time of your day to share with us and encourage people to get in touch with themselves and their healing process.
Yeah, and also, just so your viewers know, if you do feel called to kind of give this a try, and ultimately with things that are like this, I can talk to you about it for 10 hours. You ultimately have to give it a try to really see if you resonate with it or not. We do offer everybody a free session if they want to check it out.
Can you point people to resources where they can find your sessions and offerings and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. If they just come to the website, which is just breathworkonline.com, very simple. On the homepage, it's a big button that says try a free breathwork session. And they can sign up for the one they want. And, all you really want to have is a good internet connection, nice headset so you get good sound quality because part of it's music, and also a place where you won't be disturbed for a couple hours. So you don't have to worry about, if I make a sound, someone's going to be pounding on my door kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where you can really relax into the experience, and that's all you ultimately, and just, one more comment about safety.
Please, yeah.
Breathwork is not like psychedelics or plant medicine. If you take a psychedelic and you feel like you're completely overwhelmed, you're
can't
stuck.
Get out of it very easily.
You got a 6-hour ride, and you're in for it no matter what. In breathwork, even though, like we say, we encourage you to process through. If it comes up, you can handle it. You want to release it. If things get if you feel unsafe, if it is too intense, you just slow down the breath and you drop out. And that's part of the safety. It's not like psychedelics. You'll be out of the experience in 5-10 minutes after you slow down the breath. Because your physiological changes come back, you're back into your thinking mind. So, and that's one thing I love about breath work. Even though we encourage people to let go of control, ultimately at the bottom, you're always in control. You can always drop out if you need to. So, that's just another layer of safety that's there.
Yeah, that's really alluring for me, because the concept of having a bad experience and not being able to escape from it, and can create its own trauma with psychedelics or something. So I think that is a really useful thing with breath work.
Well, Michael, it's so great having you on the show. We'll have to have you back sometime. Maybe if Luke and I decide to have a
breathwork, so
we can this.
Yeah, we'll have a detox with you next time.
Yeah, that would be awesome if you guys try it out a couple of times, and then we can kind of have more of a talk about your
I would love that, actually. Let's try to do that. That'd be really fun.
Yeah, that'd be a blast. And I mean, it's the first session's free, right? So
yeah, exactly. Right.
All right, Michael. Well, thank you again so much for taking your time to be with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
All right, we'll see you around. And cut.
Nice.
Oh, you know what? I was thinking about like kind of spinning this on you in the middle, but I didn't know if it was okay.
Oh, please. I'm still rolling, so we're ready.
Okay, so what I was thinking of is I could do an actual like kind of mini experience, like 5-minute experience for people, but I don't know if it's appropriate, and I don't know how it would work in a kind of audio thing or this or that, or I mean, it would just be more of a relaxation experience because it's just really quick.
Sure, I mean,
but
I'm
it
willing to
would
try
give people
anything.
a little taster. So I don't know if that's something that anybody ever does, or whether it's even appropriate.
We had our auras read one time by a shaman, and that was really fun. So I'm always down to get boots on the ground sort of experiences going.
So it's up to you guys. I would just need a minute to like prep everything.
Yeah, sounds
I'm down.
great.
Let's do it.
Okay, just give me like 2 minutes to prep it up, and then if you come out of it and both of you said I didn't feel anything that sucked, then just don't put it in.
So Michael, if you want to introduce this for us, we're ready
Sure,
to rock.
yeah, absolutely. So this will just be 5 or 6 minutes. So it's not going to be, I'm not trying to send you into a deep dive where you're going to need support. This is more like just getting a taste of what it can be like to just with breathing a little bit deeper than normal and listening to a bit of music, how it can possibly shift your way of feeling in your body in even just 5 or 6 minutes. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's just more just observing before and after. And so I'm just going to start with first describing the actual breathing technique that I want you to follow.
Okay.
And then I'm going to do a screen share. And so you'll actually hear the music. And the music is, I just put together a few tracks by an artist. His name is Byron Metcalf, who does amazing breathwork music.
Nice.
And it's going to be basically like the first track will be a track that we might start you with, and then like a couple tracks that we might end you up with. So it's just a very, very small taster experience.
Great.
Just to give you a sense. So what I would like you to do is, first of all, make sure that you won't be disturbed, for the next 10 minutes or so. And you can do this either sitting up or laying down, and you want to listen to it in whatever way you get the best sound quality. So over the ear headset is great, or some people use earbuds. You can even do it on a phone if you want. It's totally fine. And so you want to make sure you're going to get pretty decent music quality, and because you want to listen to it, so it's fairly loud. Not like so it's like blasting your eardrums. But just kind of enveloped very nicely in this river of sound. And you want to start the breathing by starting to breathe in and out through the mouth and taking full deep breaths. So when you breathe in, it's like your belly expands a little bit. But you want to make it a relaxed breath, not like where you're tensing your body, a full, deep, but enjoyable breath. Kind of like, and either at normal speed or just a little bit faster than normal, but it's not like this, it's the fullness and the depth of the breath that's important. And you want to make it a continuous breath, like a circular breathing, always breathing in or breathing out. And you just want to stay focused on the breath, stay with the breath, stay with the breath. And if towards the end, again, this will be, it'll get very soft towards the end. If you're breathing, if your body just wants to slow down the breath for the last minute or two and breathe more gently, that's totally fine. Just kind of follow what your body wants to do. And this is a closed eye experience. You want to have an eye mask on or keep your eyes closed the entire time. And again, either sitting up or laying down is fine. You just want to be comfortable. If you're laying down, it's fine to have a pillow. Just don't have it too thick so your head's kind of craned over. You want to be fairly flat. And just let whatever wants to happen, happen. And if at any point during the 5 or 6 minutes, your body wants to release a little sound or move a little bit, just let it do what it wants to do. And just breathe and allow. Okay, so we're going to get started, and let me get this set up. Okay, so I'm going to start just by doing a very quick relaxation exercise and get you going with the breath, and then we'll start the music. So just now bringing your attention to your body, letting go of what happened earlier today or what's going to happen next. Just taking one deep breath and bringing your attention inside. And now just mentally doing a scan of your body, starting with the feet, then going through each body part, and just visualizing all the tension releasing from each body part, your calves, upper legs, torso, belly, and just sometimes people like to visualize a little white light, or just whatever works for you to put your body in a relaxed space. Relaxing your jaw muscles and your forehead muscles, maybe shaking your hands out a little bit or stretching your shoulders, and being as relaxed as you can in this moment. And now, putting your eye mask on or closing your eyes and bringing your attention, keeping it in your body. And now, breathing in and out through your mouth and starting to deepen the breath. Take full, deep breaths in and out through the mouth, feeling your belly expand with each in-breath. Taking full, deep breaths and breathing in a way where there are no gaps, where you're always breathing in or breathing out. It's creating a wonderful circle of breath. But making it an enjoyable breath, no tension at all. It's feeling like you could breathe like this forever. Breathing fully and deeply, deeply and fully, fully and deeply. Staying with the breath, putting all your attention on the breath. Letting go of everything else. Breathing fully and deeply, deeply and fully, fully and deeply. And either breathing at normal pace, normal speed, or just a little bit faster than normal, kind of feeling into what feels right to your body. But breathing fully and deeply, deeply and fully. And for some people, it supports them in making a little sound on the out-breath. That's totally optional, just kind of feeling it. Does it feel right for you? And if your body wants to be totally still, it's fine, or move around a little bit, that's fine too. But keeping your focus on the breath, breathing fully and deeply, deeply and fully, fully and deeply. And in a moment, the music will begin, and just staying with the breath. And now just staying with yourself for a bit of time more if it feels right. Just kind of regrounding yourself, staying in your body, bringing your breath back to a normal rhythm if you haven't done so already. Just being with yourself in a very gentle way. Holding space for yourself, loving yourself. Opening your heart to every aspect of your being. Just staying in your space for as long as necessary. And when you're ready, opening your eyes, and bringing yourself back into ordinary consciousness. So, how'd that go, Richard?
Oh, wow. That was super interesting. Wow.
Yeah, tell me your experience, and then I'll tell you my experience. Or I can go first. I have fairly synthesized experiences and thoughts.
Oh, yeah, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I feel currently just almost equally relaxed and energized. Like I feel very calm, but also tingly. Like definitely full body tingles. Yeah, I felt like I was just getting into a really interesting. Like I wanted that to definitely be longer, because I felt myself just getting into an interesting space where I had this one very very like sensational full body ripple. It was just like a wave went over me, and like I felt like I was getting to that sort of unconscious breathing space where I could see tapping in, yeah, just getting into something greater. Yeah, where it became sort of second, not an out of body experiencing, but sort of a more than body experience in a way. Like I wasn't seeing myself, but I could feel it becoming subconscious. I felt a little cold at one point, which was odd. But that was like post tingle. And then I also heard just at one point, just like a, it was this sort of, vibration sort of feeling at a different time than the ripple across my body. But yeah, I think the biggest feeling is just the equally like energized. Like I feel like I could go into a workout, but I could also fall asleep. It's a very strange, I don't know. It's an odd experience. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm feeling and experiencing. Richard, how about you?
Oh, yeah. So, wow. I feel very like euphoric right now. Like really like can't stop smiling joy, which is really interesting. So the first thing I experienced was I immediately got really sweaty and clammy, like immediately.
Really?
Like my armpits started dripping sweat and my hands were really cold and clammy,
Really?
my feet really cold and clammy. And I became very aware and anxious about my breathing. And I have a lot of anxiety around breathing in general. I have asthma and have had like pretty like borderline life-threatening asthma attacks in the past. So like hyper awareness of breathing has usually come with like not being able to breathe enough. And like there have been times where I've been trying to get to my rescue inhaler and passed out and woke up still struggling for breath. So it was a lot of like, originally I was very much like, I don't want to keep doing this. At like 45 seconds in, I was like, I don't want to keep doing this.
Oh,
This is,
interesting.
I'm feeling anxious. I don't want to be doing this. But I was like, I'm breathing normally. My breathing is fine.
I had a little
like,
bout
I
of
can-
anxiety. Yeah.
I can see my rescue inhaler behind my camera over there. So I was like, I know everything's fine. And then I got really, really strong tingling in my left hand. And I still feel a little bit of tingling in both my hands. Like the pinky and ring finger,
that
especially.
was me. Like that was here, like in the sort of palm, like outside of my palm, sort of.
Yeah. So I
yeah.
got it really strong in my left hand to start, and I started like moving my hands together and feeling it, and it was in my left hand, and I was immediately very present with something that I was going to mention during our podcast session about a thing that Luke and I both did in high school. In high school, we came across
Richard and I became friends, junior year of high school. That's when we met.
And in high school, a friend of mine told me about being at a camp and someone at a camp doing this thing where you are standing up and put your head between your legs and hyperventilate as much as possible for like 30 seconds and then stand up and like pressurized, try to force out breath, but don't actually breathe out. And you end up passing out for like 10 seconds. And so I did this in high school and did it with Luke. And for like the 10 seconds that you passed out, you have like really, really vivid dream sequences. And I was flashed back to doing that in your dorm room, Luke.
Yeah.
And an experience of guilt around feeling like I pressured you into doing that.
Aw.
In a way that probably wasn't healthy. And as a pastor now, looking back on it, I felt like what a abrasive way to have someone have a very personal experience. And so I was immediately like, that stinks. And when I had that thought, my right hand immediately began to tingle really extremely. And my left hand subsided. And then I had much more of just like emotional thought process around like the kind of pastor that I want to be for people and the way that I want to be present with people and invite them into doing their own spiritual work and not working to disconnect from like I have the answers, I'll fix you kind of mentality that can come very easily for me and I think is really destructive in the work of pastoring that I want to do. So like a really centered experience of a very clear understanding of the way I want to approach pastoring as my right hand began to tingle really extremely and my left hand kind of faded. And that is about where we came out of it. And I was left with that and like a lot of like just kind of happy, joy, euphoric feeling. So it was really fascinating.
Man, all that in like 7 minutes.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was
That's
more
wild.
intense. It was more intense and dramatic than I expected it to be.
And just to give you guys some feedback on the physical stuff, first of all, temperature changes are a sign of energy releasing out of your body. It's one of the three ways that your body that does release kind of stuck energy. So it just means that you're getting a release experience. And it's also true of tingling. And for Luke, I'm not surprised that you feel kind of energized and also, like both at the same time, because when you get a body release like that from tingling, there's two ways it can go. One is you can feel energized because your energy channels have gotten cleared up a bit. So like more energy is kind of pouring through your body in a natural way. But it's also you've done some work, like your body's done some release work. So
Sure.
It can also make you feel a little bit on the tired side too. So it doesn't surprise me that you felt both ways at the same time.
Yeah.
And for Richard, like the experience that you had where you went back to a childhood experience and saw that, I didn't handle that well, or I wish I'd have done it a different way. Those are really important because if they're in your unconscious and you haven't been thinking about them, there's still a thinking pattern that's impacting your present life. Like, for instance, for example, for you, like you might have been thinking, oh, what if I do that to a person again? Maybe I shouldn't really be doing this. What if I mess up? Even if it's in your unconscious mind. Or, oh, I was a bad person. Maybe I don't deserve this or I don't deserve that. So even if you're not consciously thinking about it, like going back there and releasing it really opens a space for you to be a better pastor, for you to be more present. And you saw like the realizations that came after that. Like your psyche is like, kind of said, okay, we want you to release this, and now we're going to give you some insights into how to really power forward and really, empower your, the people that you're working with in your work life.
Richard, can I
So
also,
like it all happens in order, kind of, and for a
Yeah.
reason, so to speak.
Richard, can I process that with you real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm not sad to hear you say that, but I want you to know that I don't carry any pent up hostility toward that or regret about that. I sincerely believe that I would not be as much of a holistic and curious and open-minded person as I would be if I didn't have you in my life to be leading me into things that I just wouldn't have known about or experienced. And I'm not even talking about that little stupid passing out experience specifically, because I'm a very curious person and I haven't been exposed, or wasn't at that time exposed to a lot of stuff. So you helped lead me into new areas of my life and still continue to do that. And I'm so grateful for that in my life. So thank you, and hold yourself lightly, my friend.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's something that doesn't feel heavy. It just feels like, I think that ended up a good result, but like what a sloppy way I bumbled through that. and like,
Sure.
I think for the people that did it, and for any viewers watching, I haven't looked into the thing that I described doing in high school. I don't know
Yeah, we can't
if it's a
in
good
good
thing
conscience
to do
recommend.
to your mind. So I'm not recommending this. But
Michael,
I
you might
think-
know more about the nuances of what we did than we
yeah,
do.
are you familiar with people doing this thing?
I saw you
that I
nod, so I
No,
wasn't
no,
sure.
I've never heard of it before. And okay, just also one thing, Richard. It's like your memory of what happened. It doesn't even matter if it happened that exact way or not, because what happened wasn't important. The important thing is, what meaning did you take from it? That's really the critical factor. So even if it happened in a different way than you remember it, the meaning is what's like kind of left in your brain from that. Whether the meaning is, oh, I handled it sloppily, and whatever that is, that's the critical thing. What was the decision you made from that, or what was the meaning you took from it?
Well said. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm feeling like I gotta move. Like I can't sit still.
That's what I keep. Well, it's funny because I'm a very body person. Like I love exercise. I love using my body. I think it's amazing that we have these things that work. Like it's just crazy to me that we have this. And I know I hold a lot of things in my body. And also, like you were saying, Michael, about meditation, I get very in my head about meditating. It's hard for me to quiet that hamster wheel. So having something physically to concentrate on to slow things down and focus in, I think will be really helpful for me. So I could see, honestly, this practice being something I can tap into for real, like use and therapeutic use and releasing some body stuff. Cause I've just been plagued this last year with a lot of like body issues that feel very strange to me. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is, not serendipitous, not a coincidence. This is coming into my life at this point in some ways. Like I really am looking forward to delving into this more.
And the type of breath work that I present, which is, it's for an hour and it's with very evocative, dynamic music. That specific breath work is not designed for people to do on their own, because you really can dive into really deep stuff, and it's important to be able to reach out to a facilitator, even if it's online, if you need support during the session. And that does happen with several people where they go into private chat and say, I'm in this place of really fear. How can I process through this, or that kind of thing? But like something that we just did, where you just put on some like even gentle music and just do deeper breathing in the morning for a few minutes to ground and to open a little bit, that can be a really nice daily practice to do. And you can just put in some gentle music that you love and just breathe more deeply and even just slowly for just a few minutes, just to really ground yourself and bring yourself present to start the day.
Yeah.
And
really nice.
so that is something that you can actually, create more of a daily practice around it and just kind of feel into what, how much time is right for you. And you can even do it without music. You can just, when you first get up, put your feet on the ground, just take some few minutes of slow, deep breaths just to bring yourself present. So you're not just, if I don't do something like that, I wake up, I'm in my head. It's like all this stuff I got to do today. It's like I'm gone. If I don't really take a few minutes just to ground and be present with like the joy of life, like the joy of being alive, how wonderful it is just to be able to experience being in this body. So to me, it's important just to take a few minutes in the morning to do a grounding exercise, just to stop my crazy mind from already thinking about what do I need to do next and I forgot to do this yesterday, and all this stuff that starts to plow in.
Are you a checklist person? Do you have like a to-do list checklist type of thing every day?
I do have a checklist, and sometimes I don't check it off because I'm disorganized.
I was about to say, you strike
circle.
me as the same way. I'll have a checklist, like a to-do list every day that I'll check things off, and I never accomplish it in one day. Never once has it happened. It's a week, like easy. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get it done in one day. One question I wanted to ask just about the minutia of how, like the particulars of how to breathe. I was a little caught up in that. So am I plugging my nose?
No.
Okay. So it is air is allowed to come in through the nose, but it's just not exclusive.
Yeah, and then actually during the session, in the longer sessions, sometimes people even switch to breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. I just encourage them like to go with what the body wants to do.
Okay.
It's just that in the beginning, there's a few reasons for mouth breathing. One is you can move more air,
Right.
So you dive in more quickly because of physiological changes. The second thing is whenever you're in a space in your life where you're releasing or in an emotional state, your body always starts mouth breathing. And most people don't notice that because they're just not conscious of it. But next time you really get angry or crying or whatever, you'll switch to mouth breathing.
That's
so it kind of gives
interesting.
your body permission to release. And the third part is, since in life we normally do nose breathing, this is kind of breaking a pattern. And so it kind of opens yourself up more to breaking other patterns. So there's logic to it, but as it gets deeper into the set, if your body wants to switch, it's totally fine.
This is awesome. I'm jazzed. I'm hyped right now. This is great.
There's tons more to say, but we'll keep it at this for now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Richard, any final thoughts?
No, just that was, again, that was way cooler than I expected 6 minutes to be.
Same.
I honestly, I was a little like, not skeptical, but like pessimistic. Like, oh, this will be fun. It'll be like a little thing. But like, it was really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
about
Thank
it.
you so much for giving us that experience. That was amazing.
You're very welcome.
Oh man. Sorry, go ahead.
And also, Luke, if the people want to get the music, can you put into the below the thing? I can give you the tracks, and so if they want to buy them for themselves. Okay.
Yeah, give Ben the link to the artist, and we'll put him below or
Okay,
them
great.
below. Yeah, that'd be great. Awesome. Well, yeah, man. Thank you. You've changed our lives a little bit today, and that's a blessing.
All right, thanks, guys. It was
All
awesome.
right. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much. All
Thanks
right,
so
we'll
much,
see you
Michael.
around. Oh man, what a great time.